Hey everyone, it's Rose. Welcome back to my channel. I haven't uploaded in like a month. The last video that I did, I talked about like my tips on how to get out of a reading slump, and then funny enough, after I uploaded that video, I fell into a reading slump. So I haven't been reading much. Haven't really had much to talk about, so I haven't really been filming any videos. But now I do have something to talk about. In today's video, I'm just going to be wrapping up my reading from the last 2 months. This is the first recent reads video of 2022 for me, and I'm very excited. So far this year, I've read 8 books. 5 of them I read in January. So far, I've read 6 female authors, 1 male author, and 1 non-binary author. I read all of these books physically except for one, which I read on ebook. So the first book that I read this year was Heartstopper Volume 4. This one made me cry. This one taps a little more into Charlie's mental health and how it affects him and his relationship with Nick. And then we also get to see how Nick is feeling about the whole thing and how he's handling himself. It was just a really beautiful, and I can't wait for Volume 5, which is the final volume. I don't know when it's coming out, but I also think the Netflix show is coming out very soon, and I'm so excited. So the next book that I read is Shiver by Junji Ito. I actually don't have my copy with me. I'm lending it to a friend, which has turned out to be an awful experience because it's like more than a month overdue. Anyways, this one's a horror manga. It's a collection of short stories. I think there's like, I don't remember how many there were, but I remember that I only liked maybe like 6 of them, but still overall really enjoyed the collection, so I think I gave it like 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Basterica, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is like a sci-fi dystopian horror type of book. This book is translated from Spanish. The author is from Argentina, which is very cool. This book takes place in like this dystopian world where there's a virus that spread in all of the animals. So like animal meat is poisonous for humans, and because people just refuse to be vegetarian, the government decides to legalize cannibalism. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. This book mainly just went into like the details about like the process of breeding and butchering humans as if they were pigs or something. So there wasn't really like a clear plot, and I think that might be boring for some people. So this was just like a very gross book. It's not going to be for everyone, but it was still interesting. It just brought up like discussions of morality and like the way that we treat animals. If you were planning to read this book, please look up the trigger warnings. I know that there's animal abuse, sexual assault, loss of a child, just very like graphic body horror. I think that pretty much covers it, like for the most part. So like a super minor spoiler, I mean it's not even anything like important, but there was like just this super like random sex scene in the middle of this book, like in the middle of like a butcher shop, and that was really uncomfortable. So I was just like, what? So the next book that I read was The Push by Ashley Audrain. I read this on ebook, but it is one of my book of the month books that I decided to read. I think this one was marketed as like a psychological thriller, but like I hear a lot of people saying that it's not. And like I'm not entirely sure what I think it is. Like my memory of what happened in this book is a tad fuzzy. Like it's been like 2 months since I read this book. I gave this one 3 stars, maybe a 3.5. So I almost feel like there wasn't really a plot. Okay, let me back up. This book is about a mom who thinks like her daughter is like there's something wrong with her, but like nobody else gets why she thinks that. Like they think that she's just like making shit up, and like all this stuff that she's saying that her daughter is doing that like would make her think that. Like they're like, she didn't do that, like what are you talking about? So like now she thinks she might be crazy. It's like, is she the only one seeing these things? But so like I said, I feel like there isn't really like a plot. We're just getting the story of her and her childhood and her mother's childhood and growing up living with her mom, and then like the story of her having her baby, and like we watch her baby grow up and see all like the weird shit that she does. So I think a lot of people got bored with this one. I kind of agree, like some parts were definitely slower. This was sort of depressing to read sometimes. So like the main character didn't really have a nice childhood, and her mother didn't have a nice childhood either. And so like reading about like the way they were treated by their moms was upsetting. And then like reading the things that the main character thinks about her daughter was a little unsettling. The ending though gave me chills. Like my mom was there to witness it, and she thought I was losing my mind. So it's been a couple months since I've read this, and I still seem to have like mixed feelings about this book, so I don't really know. But if you're planning to read this book, please be aware of the trigger warning: postpartum depression, loss of a child, child abuse. So the next book that I read was November 9 by Colleen Hoover. So this follows Fallon and Ben, who meet at a diner. Like she's having an argument with her dad, and he like swoops in and pretends to be her boyfriend and like sticks up for her. So like her dad leaves, and then they just like hang out for a little bit, and then they decide to meet up on November 9th every year for the next 5 years until they turn 23. Anyways, I gave this like 3 stars. This was like super cheesy, sort of insta love, like very unrealistic. The last 2 to 3 pages were like the best part of the entire book for me. In the beginning, Ben would just say like really douchey things, and I didn't really know how I felt about him. And Fallon was kind of annoying sometimes. Like they'd be in the middle of falling in love, but then she's like, wait, we can't because it'll mess up the experiment of like meeting on one day for the entire year. And it was just super annoying. Like if you're gonna fall in love with this guy, just do it. Like who cares about your deal? Like just get with the program. The next book that I read was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's about Lauren and Ryan, who are married, and they are kind of going through a rough patch, and instead of just going straight for divorce, they decide to separate for 1 year, no contact whatsoever. And then like when the year is up, they will come back and decide like, do they want to make this work, or do they just want to split up? So at the time, this was a 3-star, but I just can't seem to stop thinking about this book. Like randomly, I'll just be like, oh yeah, I read After I Do, and I remember what I like about it, and I kind of want to read it again. So I think I might bump up the rating to like a 4-star. I don't really know. But anyways, I read this in less than a day. The first 50 to 100 pages were really fun. Like we get to like see how they met and how they fell in love before we actually like find out what the problem is. I felt like sometimes it wasn't like really focused on them. It was more focused on Lauren and like what's happening in her family, which was like a nice little side plot. But like at the time I was just like, just give me the romance. Just give me the romance. I would have to read it again to like really remember what happened, but I wrote in my reading journal that Like the part where they make up was sort of underwhelming, but I don't really remember what happened. But I just remember the story was very emotional, and it brought up like a lot of my personal fears about like being with someone and getting married. The next book that I read was Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. This is a memoir. Trigger warning for child abuse, rape, toxic relationships. I gave this book 4 stars. Ashley just tells her story about what it was like growing up poor with an abusive mom and an incarcerated father. It was very heartbreaking, but at the same time, inspiring. It made me think about my relationship with my dad, like just kind of thinking how different would my life be if I wasn't close with my dad, and like how would I turn out if my parents were divorced, or like if my dad was in prison. And it also kind of made me miss my dad, because while I was reading this book, like my dad had COVID, so I hadn't seen him in like a week. So the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is the most recent book that I read. I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book follows January, whose father just passed away, so she moves into his like secret beach house to look through his stuff and like get rid of it so that she could sell the house. But while she's there, she runs into her college rival. They end up making like a bet or a deal where they will switch genres. They're both writers. They will switch genres and try to write a book in that genre. Whoever sells their book first will like win and like have benefits and shit. I gave this one 3 stars. Trigger warning for cancer, character death. Like the character doesn't die in the book, but like they talk about the death of this character a lot. Cheating, child abuse, child neglect, and drinking. Like the mood of this book was kind of all over the place. Like looking at this book, looking at the title, Beach Read, like seeing what it's about, it just seemed like it was going to be like a lighthearted romance. Like something that you can just read and have fun. But no, like sometimes this book just takes a dark turn, starts talking about her mom's journey with cancer, or like how Augustus didn't have like the best childhood. Like it was actually very tragic. Like that was very unexpected from this book, which I thought was going to be lighthearted. Another issue that I had with this book was the love interest, Gus. He was just like super pretentious sometimes, and he's like, I don't believe in love because I'm broken. But then she's all like, love conquers everything. So I guess this is kind of like a grumpy guy, bubbly girl trope. I thought this was like a hate to love romance, but it's not really a hate to love romance if she already has a crush on him in like the first 20 pages. I didn't necessarily love either of the characters, but I loved the banter, and I loved the main character's best friend. The last couple chapters of the book were my favorite. The best friend comes in and does her part and like is the best friend, and then Gus just ends up being like a big softie at the end. And then, yeah, but of course, like, the epilogue had to be cheesy and ruin it, which I'm not going to tell you what happened because that's a spoiler. However, I do want to get into a minor spoiler of something that just irritated me a little bit. So, if you don't want to be spoiled, like, fast forward a little bit. But anyways, so I think, like I had an issue with the love interest most of this book. And so one of the things that just really ticked me off was that he admitted to her that he was only an asshole to her in college because he was in love with her. Like, why do you have to be so obnoxious? I don't get that. Like, if you like somebody, or if you're in love with somebody, why are you going to be like that to them? Anyways, so that's how I felt about that. And those were all the books that I'm going to talk about in this video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye!